It's my pleasure to call to speak Douglas Ellison, who is our prospective parliamentary candidate for the constituency of Greenwich and Woolwich in South London.
Good morning. 21 years ago, as a schoolboy just down the road, I stood rather like this before my class. I was asked how I would have voted in the referendum on Europe. The purpose of the lesson was to teach us how a parliamentary democracy worked in the United Kingdom. My textbook told me that it was based upon me lending my vote to the party of my choice in a general election every 5 years. So what has changed, apart from the length of my trousers? Simply this: teachers today cannot give my children the same lesson, because Maastricht has changed my old textbook. Maastricht rewrote the chapters on how our parliamentary democracy works. And unless you and I do something, the entire textbook, which has been part of all of our lives, will be changed forever. That is why I want a referendum. You see, I'm rather attached to my old textbook, and before it's changed altogether, I want to be asked whether or not I agree. After all, there are some lessons that should never be forgotten. Thank you. Our next speaker needs no introduction. He has become a legend. He has never been afraid to speak out, no matter the pressure exerted on him to keep silent. When he has spoken out, he has made economic forecasts that practically always have challenged conventional wisdom. Time after time, he has been proven right. He became particularly prominent during the period when he was the close economic advisor to the then Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. The Referendum Party is truly delighted that he will be our prospective parliamentary candidate for the City of London and Westminster. Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Alan Walters.
Ladies and gentlemen, my task is to talk to you about your money. That is, the pounds, shilling and pence in your pocket. Oh, I'm wrong, aren't I? There should be pounds, shilling and pence in your pockets, but now it's pounds and centimes. Shortly it'll be euros and I've forgotten what they're called, the euro pennies. But they will be in your pocket if monetary union goes ahead. Money is a very serious business. I think Keynes once said, those who command the money command the state. And there's a lot to be said for that point of view. Well, if in 1997 the government of the day commits Britain to a monetary union by joining stage 3 of the Maastricht process as a founder member, then, from 1999 onwards, then Britain will surrender to the European Central Bank all its power to determine interest rates, rate of inflation, the levels of unemployment, and the rate of growth. Sterling, in 1999, will be, in the words of the treaty, irrevocably fixed to the euro. And Europe's synthetic currency will start its big takeover of national currencies. From 2002 onwards, we shall have to trade in our pounds in exchange for euros, whatever their shape, size, or colour. And the pound, after many centuries of sterling service, will disappear. It will become merely a collector's curio, like the Maria Theresa dollar. Then the emasculation, and this is the important point, the complete emasculation of British government's powers over monetary policy will be absolutely complete, and to all intents and purposes, irrevocable. The Treasury and the Bank of England will lose all their powers over monetary policy. The bank will be an agent, rather like an errand boy of the European Central Bank. The Bank of England will be completely subservient to the European Central Bank. At the same time, the process of monetary union will require convergence, and it will require also budgetary constraints, less than 3% of GNP as a budget deficit, and it will require that the basic economic policy of the United Kingdom be supervised by Brussels and the central bank in Frankfurt. So the Frankfurt Central Bank will control interest rates and credit throughout all participating countries. It's the same for all. It doesn't matter whether one country is suffering from a long slump and another is feeling the heat of incipient inflation. You get the same medicine. It's rather like those of you about my age and were in the army will recall a wonderful treatment which was dished out by the medical officers. It was called a number 9 pill. Now, a number 9 pill was given for both constipation and diarrhea, headache and heartache and what have you. Well, the European Central Bank is the equivalent of a number 9. In fact, it's even worse than a number 9 because it's meant only for what's wrong with Dr. Cole, but we'll leave that aside for the time being. And this reflects something. This is you might think I'm just rabbiting on as an academic here, but I'm not. It is a reality, a painful reality. Well, as we saw in the late and unlamented exchange rate mechanism, which ruled us until 1992. This occurred because with the German accession of East Germany to the Federal Republic, from 1990 through to 1993, Germany wanted high interest rates because the inflation, which is actually, in my view, a very stupid decision by Kohl to trade the Eastmark for the Deutschmark of 1-to-1, caused an enormous inflationary buildup. In order to counter that, the Bundesbank increased interest rates dramatically. Now, you increase interest rates normally when you see inflationary pressure and when there's overextension of employment. Now, this is in exactly the opposite circumstances. Europe, France in particular, was becoming more and more depressed, and France continues that policy of pegging the Frankfurt it's called now, to the Deutschmark, and she has, bless her, at least 13.5% official unemployment. Unofficially, the unemployment is somewhere near 20%. Now, this is precisely the sort of circumstances that a single currency or a monetary union forces on the member countries. Well, you might think, and I must say I've thought this at times, that however undesirable a single currency would be, and however undesirable in many respects, if the European Central Bank were composed of very wise men, philosopher kings, people who were disinterested in their personal or their nation's circumstances, but whose concern was solely for the welfare of the people of Europe, irrespective of race, color, or what have you, then you might think there's something in it. I mean, this group of people who would run our monetary policy, the monetary policy of the whole of Europe, would be, you might think, somewhat superior to the people we have. And ideally, this body would be supervised into general oversight by an effective parliamentary system, an effective parliamentary body. Well, such supervision would avoid a lot of the political interference in the detail and techniques of policy. And it would give the imprimatur of democratic legitimacy to the whole process. To ensure such democratic oversight over these philosopher kings, you know, these wise bureaucrats who are only interested in our welfare. You know the sort of bureaucrat I mean. Meet them every day. Now, to ensure this, we need democratic oversight. And we need open operations by the European Central Bank. It needs to be completely open and above board. No secret meetings, no cabals meeting here and there to promote this interest or that interest. Now, however, I have to tell you, the European Central Bank is so far from this ideal, it's the antithesis of it. In the Maastricht Treaty, the European Central Bank is to be ruled by a council of unelected central bankers. They're not elected. And they're to be given the most awesome powers. In exercising these powers, the European Central Bank is accountable to no one at all. True, it has to submit, after the event, an annual report to the what's called the European Parliament. And I know there are some members here, and I wish to apologize, but it's really quite a joke. The European Parliament... The European Parliament wanders around Europe, ever peripatetic, and gets weaker and weaker kneed in the process. And that's certainly no democratic legitimacy for the European Central Bank can be found there. But they have to give this report, and no doubt, in the usual self-serving way of such bureaucracies, that report will be full of complaints against what everyone else is doing, and they will do, the bank itself, of course, will do no wrong. No mea culpa, no mea maxima culpa, it's them that did it. So the European Central Bank also will be setting its own objectives, and is under no requirement to disclose them to anybody. In short, this unelected, unsupervised, and undemocratic body has been given the most immense power over the welfare of the European Union. Well, because Germany is the great monetary power in Europe, the European Central Bank was fashioned on their own model of the Bundesbank. The Bundesbank, as you know, was designed in order to avoid detailed political intervention in monetary policy. But on these large issues, such as the one we discussed, German reunification, the Bundesbank failed to keep the politicians out. And the dirty hands of the politicians are all over that decision, and a disastrous decision, in my view, it was for Europe, and remains influencing Europe, as I say, to this day. But you can argue against this, willy-nilly. The Germans always had the chance of throwing Chancellor Kohl out if they didn't like his policies. There was a degree of German democratic supervision there of Kohl's behavior. But what about the bureaucracies of the ECB? They have no such restraints. There's no one to throw out there, no procedure for throwing them out. They do not offer themselves to the electorate for their approval. The predominantly German civil servants in the central bank will hardly have Britain's interests in mind. Rather, their concern will be first Germany, and secondly, with their close relations in continental Europe. Now, So far, I've discussed what had happened if Britain joined the monetary union at the earliest possible date and became a core or a founder member. Now, I fear whatever politicians may debate, the likelihood of that is very small indeed. The reason is that simply there's no time for that process to go ahead. Granted, there's going to be an election next April, and it's highly unlikely that Britain will be a founder member. So if Britain joins then the monetary union, and I pray it doesn't, it will be after 1999 as a non-founding member. So monetary union will start without us, and a good thing too. But here's the rub, and here's what frightens me. To keep Mr. Major's options open, the powers of Europe, and I mean by that Dr. Tietmeyer, Herr Kohl, and Herr Theo Wegel, they are the powers of Europe to all intents and purposes, have said that you've got to serve 2 years apprenticeship in the exchange rate mechanism before you can join the monetary union. Now, this sentence, if what they say so, of 2 years in the exchange rate mechanism is enough to send shivers down many a collective spine. The actual details of the ERM, the new ARM as it is called, it's rather like a sort of Euro version of a Chinese water torture. Those are yet to be disclosed, but we know it will be policed by, guess who? The heavies in Frankfurt and the European Central Bank. They will be policing it and seeing that we behave according to the rules. Now, they'll keep us in, they'll keep us our fiscal policy and our monetary policy in step. I was going to say goose step, but that's probably the wrong thing to say. Now, I find it intriguing that our beloved Chancellor, Kenneth Clarke, has unequivocally said, I think time and time again, that Britain's not going to go into another ERM. I applaud him. We all must applaud him on this issue. This is, of course, the reason why is that I don't think he could get any support. Only perhaps the odd lunatic fringe, as they call them. But it wouldn't have any support to get the ERM imposed again in Britain. Why? Because we know how miserable those years were that we spent in the last version of this monstrosity. Yet, Herr Wegel says this is, and I quote, an indispensable condition. So we are at a very interesting crossroads here, and I'm not going to reflect any further on the political shenanigans that may come out of this curious situation with Kenneth Clarke being one of the most enthusiastic Europhiliacs, and the fact that he believes it would be impossible to take Britain into an ERM. And there are lots of loose ends there you may like to tie together, but I can't do it here. Well, finally, I believe that the fundamental reason for a monetary union is that it's bound to beget a highly centralized European political union, a European federal behemoth. The single currency is, well, what was it Churchill called Italy? The soft underbelly, didn't he? Monetary union is really the soft underbelly of political union. Many people who would detest political union can agree that monetary union gets rid of these costs of exchange rates and things like that. So I think that is the reason why the single currency is being pursued with such, indeed, catastrophic determination by the Germans and the French and some other countries, but those are the principal ones. Now, the single currency were leaders, in my view, to what I call the United Corporatist States of Europe. Because Mr. Charles de Gaulle is here with us today, and I say to him, your grandpa was quite right. Your grandpa was entirely right. The continent, they are different from us. Yeah, I was going to say as Anglo-Saxons and include our American brethren in here, but I'll avoid that temptation. But in Europe, they believe strongly, not as we do in healthy and open competition, but in corporatism. Government and business decisions of a massive kind by a cozy consensus between union bosses, busybody bureaucrats, or we might think bumbling bureaucrats, and big business. And in the need for a super large state to fight their imagined enemies in America and in the Far East and Japan and so on. Monetary union is seen as the linchpin of this greater union, which of course was centered around Germany, a Germanocentric Europe. The concentration of monetary power spawns and inevitably implies the concentration of budgetary power and political power, and ultimately security and foreign policy. Now, we will never, as some people suggest, Anglicize Europe, but Europe may well corporatize us. Well, at least the people of this kingdom should not be shoehorned into the United Corporate States of Europe without a free and open debate. They, and we've got it, they and they only should decide. It's their future and it's our future. Now, I say this, there may be Europhiles in this audience, and we welcome them. We welcome them because many of us probably believe that moving into a federal Europe would be better for Britain. We welcome them here, but we say, do that, but only do it with democratic legitimacy. That is to say, only through a referendum. Thank you very much.